Tonight, an English husband ties a rope around his wife's waist and leads her into a crowded market. He announces that she is for sale. People gather. Someone calls out a price. And when the auction ends, another man pays the husband and leaves with his wife. The sale looks like a livestock auction, but the buyer is often not a stranger. He may already be the woman's lover. The price may be only a few shillings, sometimes accompanied by food or drink. Everyone involved understands that the payment is symbolic. The couple are not trying to make money. They are trying to end a marriage. For most ordinary people in 18th and early 19th century England, a complete legal divorce was almost impossible to obtain. It required money, court proceedings, and eventually a private act of parliament. Poor couples could separate. They could run away. But neither person could safely remarry while the first marriage still existed. So some communities created their own public ritual. The husband brought his wife to a market, fair or tavern. A sale was announced before witnesses. The new man paid the old husband, and the crowd treated the marriage as finished. The law did not. Why did couples believe that an illegal auction could replace a divorce? Did wives agree to be sold, or were some forced into it? Why was a rope sometimes placed around the woman's neck or waist? And what happened when the police, the courts, or the first husband refused to accept that the marriage had ended? Tonight, we will enter the markets where marriages were sold for the price of a meal, examine the laws that trapped unhappy couples together, and discover why a ceremony that looked like public humiliation could sometimes offer a woman a way out. Before we begin, you can subscribe if you enjoy calm journeys through the stranger details of history. Then settle back and imagine a market where the most important item being exchanged is not a person, but the right to begin another life. The first mistake is to imagine that English law once contained an official right allowing a husband to sell his wife. It did not. No statute instructed a man to place a halter around a woman and take bids. No recognized court issued a certificate saying that ownership had passed. A wife sale did not dissolve the marriage. The buyer did not become the woman's legal husband. Any later marriage ceremony could expose the participants to accusations of bigamy. The ritual belonged to custom, not law. That difference was obvious to lawyers and less obvious in the village where the sale took place. Law was not the only system governing ordinary life. Neighbors decided who belonged in a household. Employers decided which name to enter in a wage book. Landlords decided whether a couple could rent a room. Parish officers decided who might become responsible for supporting a poor family. A public ceremony could persuade these people even when it failed to persuade a judge. The sale announced three things. The old husband no longer claimed the woman. The buyer accepted responsibility for living with her. The community had witnessed the transfer. No private conversation could provide the same proof. If the first husband appeared years later and denied the agreement, dozens of people might remember the market. The crowd functioned as an archive. This helps explain why the event was noisy. An unhappy couple could separate quietly. Many did. A man left for another town. A woman moved in with a new partner. They told neighbors that the old marriage was over. Wife selling added theater because theater made memory. The rope The bidding, the money, and the drink turned separation into a story no one forgot. The story could protect the new couple. It could also humiliate the woman. These two truths must remain together. Some wives helped arrange their own sales and chose the buyer in advance. Others may have accepted the ritual because every available alternative was worse. Some protested. Some were intoxicated. Some were treated cruelly. A practice designed within male legal power could occasionally help a woman escape without becoming a practice of female freedom. The road to the market began with marriage law. In 18th century England, marriage was understood as a lifelong bond. The Church of England did not ordinarily recognize a complete divorce, allowing both parties to marry again while the former spouse lived. Church courts could declare that a marriage had never been valid. They could also grant a separation from bed and board. Neither solution resembled a modern no-fault divorce. An annulment required a reason showing that the marriage was defective from the beginning. The parties might be too closely related under the rules then recognized. One might have been unable to consent. A previous marriage might still exist. The ceremony might be challenged. A miserable marriage was not automatically an invalid marriage. Cruelty, hatred, poverty, and abandonment could make life unbearable without proving that no marriage had ever existed. A separation from bed and board allowed husband and wife to live apart. It did not free either to remarry. The marriage continued. The separated woman remained tied to a husband who might be absent for years. The separated man remained unable to form a second lawful marriage. For people wanting a new family, separation solved only half the problem. A complete divorce became available through Parliament, but only through a long and expensive route. A husband alleging adultery might begin in the church courts, sue the wife's lover for damages in a common law action known as criminal conversation, and then seek a private act of Parliament dissolving the marriage. Each stage cost money: lawyers, travel, witnesses, fees, and time placed the process beyond ordinary laborers. Between 1,700 and 1,857, Parliament granted only a few hundred full divorces. The number is striking because millions of marriages existed during the same period. The legal remedy was real. For most people, it was almost imaginary. A wealthy husband could turn adultery into litigation. A farm laborer could barely afford to miss a day's work. A private act required influence and persistence. The market required a rope and witnesses. Poor people did not choose wife selling because they believed it was refined. They chose it because official law had priced them out. Women faced an even harsher standard. A husband could seek divorce for his wife's adultery. A wife generally needed to prove adultery combined with serious additional wrongdoing, such as cruelty or abandonment. The law assumed that a husband's infidelity injured marriage differently from a wife's. This inequality was not hidden. It was built into the route to divorce. The same legal culture shaped property. Under the common law doctrine commonly called coverture, a married woman's independent legal and economic position was greatly restricted. Her personal property and earnings generally came under her husband's control, though trusts, settlements, local practices, and courts of equity created exceptions. The details varied. The central imbalance remained. Marriage gave the husband legal powers the wife did not share. This mattered after separation. A woman leaving her husband needed food, shelter, clothing, and work. Her earnings might still be claimed through the marriage. Debts she incurred could become disputed. The husband could be held responsible for some necessary expenses while also attempting to deny responsibility. No clean legal line separated the households. A wife sale tried to draw that line publicly. The husband accepted payment. The buyer accepted the woman. The community understood that the first man would no longer maintain her, and the second man would. The ritual translated a complicated legal relationship into an exchange everyone recognized. It looked like the sale of property because marriage law already treated wives through property-like ideas. A husband could sue another man for sexual relations with his wife. The action for criminal conversation claimed damages for the loss of her comfort, society, and services. The wife was not the plaintiff. Her husband sued her lover. The trial discussed her conduct while giving her little independent legal voice. For a poor man, such an action was unrealistic, but the legal threat still mattered. If a woman left her husband and lived with another man, the husband might demand money, threaten trouble, or attempt to reclaim her. A public sale transformed the lover from an unauthorized intruder into a buyer who had paid for the husband's consent. It did not change law. It changed the relationship among the three people. The triangular arrangement appears repeatedly in recorded sales. The wife wishes to leave. The new man wishes to live with her. The husband wishes to end responsibility or receive compensation. The auction provides a bargain. Sometimes the buyer is the only serious bidder. The crowd does not discover a husband for the woman. It witnesses a decision already made. This is why the tiny prices should not be read as market value. A shilling did not represent the price of a human life. It represented completion. The coin made the agreement visible. Beer, gin, or a meal could serve the same symbolic purpose. Everyone saw that something had changed hands. The rope carried a similar function. Reports describe halters placed around the neck, arm, or waist. The imagery imitated livestock markets. It was intentionally public and coarse. Some women insisted that the halter be used because custom seemed more convincing when performed correctly. Others surely experienced it as degradation. A single symbol could mean legitimacy to one participant and humiliation to another. The location mattered too. Smithfield in London was famous as a livestock market, and later caricatures often placed wife selling there. Actual sales occurred in many settings: market square, fairs, public houses, streets, fields near a market, anywhere a crowd could gather and remember. The public house was especially useful. It supplied witnesses, drink, a room for bargaining, and sometimes a table from which the sale could be announced. After payment, the parties might share alcohol. The drink marked agreement in the same way a meal concluded other bargains. It could also cloud consent. Newspaper reports enjoyed the spectacle. Editors described ropes, prices, speeches, arguments, and crowd reactions. The stranger the event sounded, the more likely it was to be reprinted elsewhere. One sale could travel through several newspapers, making the custom appear more common than it was. Some reports were incomplete. Some repeated rumor. Some confused planned sales with completed sales. Some may have exaggerated details for amusement. Historians, therefore, count cautiously. Hundreds of cases have been collected, but not every reported incident is equally reliable. Across more than a century, wife sale remained rare. Its fame exceeded its frequency. Rarity does not make it unimportant. A rare custom can reveal a common problem. Most unhappy couples did not sell wives. Many faced the same closed legal door. They deserted, eloped, negotiated private separations, lived apart, or formed second unions without legal security. Wife selling made that hidden world visible because it happened in public. The custom appears to have developed into its recognizable ritual form near the end of the 17th century. Earlier examples exist of men transferring wives or claiming to do so. But the market auction with a halter belongs especially to the 18th and 19th centuries. It grew during a period of expanding markets, wage labor, migration, and printed news. The ceremony borrowed the language of commerce from the world around it. People bought and sold animals, tools, furniture, leases, labor, and household goods in public. Auctions established price through witnesses. The wife sale used the same machinery to solve something the official legal system would not solve cheaply. Its form was familiar even when its object was shocking. The public often responded with laughter. Humor made the event tolerable. A husband advertised supposed defects. A wife answered back. The buyer bargained. Spectators shouted bids they had no intention of honoring. Newspapers repeated the exchange as comedy. Behind the laughter stood a failed marriage. Humor could protect the participants from shame. If the crowd treated the sale as a performance, the woman could leave without a private scandal whispered for years. Everyone had seen the ending. No one needed to pretend the first marriage continued happily. Humor could also excuse cruelty. A woman led by a rope became entertainment. Spectators could laugh while ignoring whether she wanted to be there. Newspaper readers enjoyed the absurdity without asking what choices she possessed. The custom's comic surface is one reason its violence can disappear in retelling. Consent must therefore be examined case by case. When the buyer was already the woman's chosen partner, consent is likely. When she helped organize the event, argued over price, or insisted the sale continue, her agency becomes visible. When she protested, was threatened, or was passed to an unknown bidder, the same interpretation fails. Even clear consent existed within constraint. A wife may have preferred the buyer. She still needed her husband's cooperation because the law gave him advantages. Her preferred escape route involved being publicly represented as an object transferred between men. Choice inside an unjust system does not make the system just. The husband's consent also had practical value after the sale. He could promise not to sue the buyer. He could agree not to interfere with the new household. He could release claims to the woman's earnings or possessions as far as local practice allowed. He could tell parish officers that another man supported her. The coin purchased peace more than personhood. The buyer took a risk. The first marriage remained valid. If the woman later left him, he possessed no marital rights equal to a lawful husband's. If the first husband changed his mind, conflict could return. If the couple went through another wedding, bigamy laws might apply. The public ceremony created local certainty inside legal uncertainty. The wife carried the greatest risk. If the buyer abandoned her, she might seek support from the legal husband who had sold her. He could deny responsibility. The parish might dispute which man should maintain her. Children complicated everything. Who supported children from the first marriage? How were later children described? Which surname did they use? The market ritual answered none of these questions securely. Yet ordinary communities often lived with imperfect answers. A child could be known by the name of the household raising him. A woman could be called the wife of her buyer without a valid marriage. Neighbors might accept the arrangement for decades. Local life depended upon recognition more than documents. Problems emerged when someone appealed to official authority. A magistrate could declare the sale meaningless. A parish officer could demand support from the legal husband. A court could treat the later relationship as adultery. A second marriage could be prosecuted as bigamy. The participants had not escaped law. They had moved beneath its attention. This is one reason publicity was both protection and danger. Witnesses helped establish the bargain. The same crowd could attract constables. A newspaper report could carry the story to a magistrate. The ritual needed visibility to work socially and invisibility to survive legally. Authorities did not respond consistently. Some magistrates condemned the practice. Some ordered husbands to support wives they claimed to have sold. Some imposed fines or imprisonment for disorder, cruelty, or unlawful conduct. Others appeared uncertain about the exact offense or chose not to interfere. Law on paper met local discretion. The sale itself was not always prosecuted through one obvious crime. The marriage remained intact, but announcing a fictional auction did not automatically fit a simple statute. If violence occurred, assault law could apply. If a later marriage occurred, bigamy could apply. If the crowd caused disorder, public order powers could apply. If the husband refused maintenance, poor law consequences could apply. The ritual sat in a legal gap. This gap helped the custom survive. Everyone knew it was not a valid divorce. Not everyone knew what a magistrate should do at the moment the rope appeared. By the time authorities reacted, the woman might already be living in another county. The market scene therefore combined law, custom, and theatre. The law said the marriage continued. The custom said the husband had released the wife. The theatre persuaded the community to remember the custom. All three existed at once. Now, enter a provincial market on a busy day. Farmers bring animals. Traders arrange produce. Laborers look for work. Children move between stalls. A husband and wife arrive with a man who already knows both of them. The sale is announced. The crowd may believe the event spontaneous. It may have been negotiated for days. The woman knows where she will sleep that night. The buyer knows the amount he will pay. The husband knows the public house where the agreement will be completed. Only the spectators believe they are watching an open auction. A few comic bids are called. The husband rejects them. The intended buyer offers a small sum. The husband accepts. The halter passes from one man's hand to another. Coins touch a palm. The three enter a tavern. From the outside, a woman has been sold. From inside the bargain, one household has ended and another has begun. Both descriptions are true. The meaning depends upon which part of the event we choose to see. The customs defenders later emphasized agreement. Its critics emphasized degradation. The historical record supports both. Some wife sales worked as negotiated separations. The ritual itself remained built upon the husband's supposed authority to transfer responsibility for his wife. Agency and inequality were not opposites. They occupied the same market square. One of the most detailed surviving reports describes a sale at Carlisle in April 1832. The husband was Joseph Thompson, a farmer. He and his wife Mary had been married for about 3 years. According to the published account, they agreed that the marriage had not brought happiness and decided to separate. That opening matters. The event was presented not as a sudden kidnapping, but as a planned ending. Joseph brought Mary into Carlisle and employed the town bellman to announce the sale. A bellman was a public messenger. He walked through streets, rang a handbell, and called notices loudly enough for shopkeepers, laborers, and passers-by to hear. The couple did not hide their purpose. They purchased publicity. Mary was described as young, lively, and neatly dressed. A rope or halter was placed around her. The crowd gathered. The report treated the scene with the mixture of fascination and condemnation common in newspaper writing about wife sales. Joseph then delivered a speech. The speech is probably not a perfect word-for-word record. Newspapers shaped dialogue. Later collections repeated and polished it. Yet its general structure is revealing. Joseph described the disadvantages of marriage, complained about his wife, and advertised her abilities as though she were an object at market. He mixed bitterness with performance. The crowd received domestic conflict as entertainment. The bidding ended with Henry Mears, described as a pensioner. The price was 20 shillings and a Newfoundland dog. Mary left with Mears. The husband received money and an animal. The strange combination made the story unforgettable. If we stop there, the event appears to be pure degradation. A young woman is priced beside a dog. The fuller report says that Mary approved the buyer and appeared pleased with the result. That does not remove the humiliation of the ceremony. It changes the question, why would a woman agree to it? Because the buyer offered a household she preferred and the husband's public consent reduced future conflict, Mary could leave without pretending to disappear. Mears could take her without wondering whether Joseph would later demand compensation. Joseph could claim that responsibility had passed. The sale gave each person something the law would not package cheaply. The dog also shows that price was not calculated like ordinary property. 20 shillings was meaningful money for working people, but it did not represent Mary's economic worth. The animal helped complete a bargain among men, while the woman's choice determined whether the bargain would function. If Mary had refused to leave with Mears, the rope alone could not create a stable household. The report ended in a public house. Drink often followed wife sales because agreement required social closure. The participants and witnesses could say the matter had been settled over ale. Tomorrow, the legal marriage remained. Tonight, the community had watched it end. Carlisle became famous because the account was unusually detailed. Most cases survive in only a few sentences. A local paper announces that a laborer sold his wife for a shilling. A later paper copies the item. No one records what the woman said. No one follows the couple 10 years later. The archive prefers spectacle over consequence. An 1,816 report from Billingborough in Lincolnshire describes a wife sold for 1 guinea. The newspaper condemned the event and noted that the woman afterwards lived openly with the purchaser. Someone consulted a magistrate. The magistrate explained that the sale had not dissolved the marriage and that the original husband remained responsible for supporting his wife and her children. This response exposes the collision between custom and law. The couple believed public transfer ended responsibility. The magistrate said responsibility continued for life. The buyer possessed the woman's companionship. The husband retained legal obligation. The supposed divorce had produced 2 households and no clean legal boundary. The newspaper's language was harsh. It treated the husband as disgraceful and the woman's new relationship as prostitution. Middle-class observers often saw wife sale as evidence of ignorance among the poor. They did not necessarily ask why the poor lacked an affordable, lawful alternative. Condemnation protected the dignity of marriage without opening the exit. A later report from Hull offers almost comic reversal. A wife had been sold by Henry Frost to William Whiting for 1 shilling and 6pence. After some time, she returned to Frost. The purchaser paid the husband 2 guineas to take her back. The case makes nonsense of the idea that 1 clean transfer solved everything. Relationships changed. The new household failed. The first husband had to agree again. The second payment exceeded the first by a great distance. A ritual designed to create finality became another negotiation. What did the woman want at each stage? The brief newspaper item does not say, "This absence is typical." Men's names, prices, and jokes survive. The wife appears as the thing moving between them. Her return may have been voluntary. It may have followed conflict or abandonment. The archive leaves the central person almost silent. Silence should not be mistaken for consent. It should not be mistaken for force either. The honest answer is that the record does not tell us. A responsible history marks the limit rather than filling it with a convenient story. Other cases preserve clearer female insistence. At Wenlock Market in 1830, a woman reportedly demanded that the sale proceed, even when her husband hesitated. She was sold for 2 shillings and 6pence. The detail has been repeated because it reverses the expected image. The husband becomes reluctant. The wife insists upon departure. Her insistence suggests that the sale could function as leverage for a woman whose husband controlled the legal exit. She could not simply purchase freedom in her own name under the ordinary property structure. A new partner could pay the husband. The auction transformed her wish into a bargain men were expected to honor. It would be misleading to celebrate this as equality. The woman still needed a buyer. She still passed through male consent. She still performed an imitation of property sale. But within those limits, she used the ritual to force movement. People without legal power often work through customs created by the powerful. Some women reportedly selected the halter or asked that formalities be followed. Why preserve a symbol so humiliating? Because a badly performed sale might be challenged as incomplete. If the community expected a rope, bidding, payment, and transfer, omitting one step weakened the story. The woman who wanted the result could demand the ritual. This is similar to other unofficial agreements. A handshake has no magic. A witness has no power to rewrite statute. Yet form gives participants confidence. Repeated performance creates a sense that the community knows the rules. The halter became evidence of seriousness. The comparison with livestock was deliberate, but not always literal. A husband did not usually expect strangers to inspect his wife and bid according to health or labor capacity. The intended buyer often waited nearby. The auction language dramatized release. The woman was not evaluated like a cow. She was still represented through a ceremony borrowed from cattle sale. The distinction prevents two opposite errors. The first is to claim women were simply sold as chattel in every case. The second is to claim the ceremony was harmless because the buyer was prearranged. The form mattered. Publicly placing a rope on a wife declared that the husband possessed the authority to give her away. Consent could alter the outcome without erasing the message. The husband's speech often advertised domestic abilities. The wife could cook, she could work, she was healthy, or the speech mocked habits he disliked. Newspapers loved these lists because they turned marriage into a comic catalogue. The wife might answer with her own criticism. The market briefly allowed private resentment to become public dialogue. Ordinary marriage disputes rarely entered print. A laborer's unhappy home left little record. Wife's sale created a scene colorful enough for newspapers. This gives historians a distorted archive. We know more about the extraordinary auction than about thousands of quiet separations. The custom must therefore be placed beside desertion. Desertion was simpler and far more common. A husband left. A wife left. One partner migrated for work and never returned. Another formed a new household elsewhere. Distance did what law would not. Industrial change made disappearance easier. Growing towns absorbed strangers. Canals, roads, and later railways increased movement. Military service, seasonal labor, domestic service, mining, and factory work separated families. A man could become Thomas in one county and John in another. A woman could present herself as a widow. Pretending widowhood carried risks, but it gave a new union social respectability. Few neighbors could verify a death hundreds of miles away. The absent spouse became legally alive and socially dead. Wife sale achieved the same result without distance. It declared a kind of death in front of home neighbors. Elopement offered another route. A married woman left with a lover. The husband might pursue them. He might sue the lover if he could afford it. He might negotiate money, or he might accept the separation. The wife sale converted elopement from an unauthorized escape into a witnessed agreement. Private separation deeds served wealthier couples. Lawyers could prepare terms covering maintenance, property, children, and living apart. The marriage continued, and remarriage remained forbidden, but financial expectations became clearer. Poor couples rarely had property large enough to justify the expense. Their deed was the crowd. Informal written agreements sometimes accompanied sales. A husband might sign a note surrendering claims. The paper looked official even when it lacked power to dissolve marriage. It could still persuade local people and provide evidence of consent. Ordinary communities used writing to strengthen custom without confusing it entirely with law. The agreement might promise that the husband would never trouble the wife or buyer. It might state the price. Witnesses added names or marks. A person unable to write placed a cross. The paper recorded intention even if a court refused the legal conclusion. This practical value explains why people could know the sale was not a true divorce and use it anyway. They were not always ignorant. They may have understood that Parliament would not recognize the ceremony. They needed the first husband to recognize it. Local peace mattered more than abstract validity. The custom also responded to maintenance law. A husband had responsibilities toward his wife, but enforcement depended upon circumstances. If she left without justification, he might refuse support. If he abandoned her, parish authorities could pursue him. A buyer taking over the household reduced the chance that the woman would seek poor relief. This interested parish officers. The English poor law system placed responsibility for relief upon local communities. Officials worried about who possessed a legal settlement in the parish and who must support a dependent family. An abandoned wife and children could become a charge on local rates. A wife sale appeared to shift that burden to another man. Legally, the shift was uncertain. Practically, if the buyer fed the household, the parish saved money. This may help explain why some local authorities tolerated transactions they publicly condemned. There are reports that poor law officials pressed separated husbands to take responsibility or arrange a sale rather than leave a family dependent upon the parish. Such reports require caution because details vary and later retellings can exaggerate official involvement. The broader incentive is clear. Local government wanted someone identifiable to pay. The buyer's willingness signaled that he accepted this responsibility. He did not merely acquire companionship. He agreed to maintain a woman and perhaps her children. This made the symbolic payment more complicated. Money passed from buyer to husband, but future costs passed in the opposite direction. A woman with young children might find a buyer harder to secure. The children increased expense. Some went with the mother, some stayed with the father, some were divided. The brief sale reports often treat this enormous decision as a secondary detail. Thomas Hardy would later place a child inside the most famous fictional wife sale. In The Mayor of Casterbridge, published in 1886, Michael Henchard sells his wife Susan and their young daughter to a sailor named Newson. Henchard acts while drunk. The sale becomes the moral wound around which the entire novel turns. Hardy did not invent the custom. He drew upon reports and local memory of wife selling. Many contemporary readers still found the opening unbelievable. By the late Victorian period, the ritual already appeared to belong to a remote and shameful England. Fiction preserved what reform and respectability wished to forget. The novel is not a documentary case. Henchard's rage, Susan's reaction, Newson's arrival, and the later consequences belong to Hardy's design, yet the scene captures several historical features: a market setting, public bidding, a pretense of lawful transfer, a buyer who takes the woman away, the question of whether the sale truly ended the first marriage. Hardy places remorse at the center. Henchard wakes sober and recognizes what he has done. Real newspaper reports rarely follow husbands into the next morning. They provide spectacle without conscience. The novel asks, what public custom cannot settle? Can a payment erase responsibility? The answer is no. Even where a sale helped an unhappy wife leave, it did not erase the history of the marriage. Children remembered. Property disputes returned. The first husband could reappear. The buyer could disappear. Human relationships resisted the clean finality of auction. This is one reason wife sale worked best when everyone continued to cooperate. The husband stayed away. The buyer maintained the household. The wife accepted the new union. Neighbors treated the arrangement as marriage. No one asked a court to examine it. Custom survived through continued consent, not through one moment of bidding. When cooperation ended, legal reality returned. The first marriage still existed. The wife might have no enforceable claim against the buyer. The husband might still face maintenance obligations. Children from the new relationship could face questions of legitimacy. The ritual had postponed conflict rather than solved it. Bigamy created particular danger. If the woman and buyer went through a marriage ceremony while the first husband lived, the second marriage was invalid. Prosecution was possible. The same applied to a husband who sold his wife and then married someone else. Both parties wanted to act as divorced. Law insisted they were not. Some avoided a second ceremony and simply cohabited. This reduced the evidence of bigamy, but denied the new couple the protections of lawful marriage. A woman could spend decades as the recognized wife of a man who was legally a stranger. If he died, inheritance became uncertain. If he left, she could not claim ordinary marital rights. Local recognition could be strong enough during life and weak at death. Neighbors knew the couple. The law asked for valid marriage. Custom built a home. Property exposed its foundation. The market sale, therefore, exchanged one insecurity for another. The woman escaped a marriage she disliked. She entered a union she preferred, but the new household existed outside the law's safest category. For some women, that was still the better choice. The buyer's motives varied. He might love the woman, he might desire her labor, he might accept her children. He might see the transaction as cheap access to a dependent partner. Consent at the market could not guarantee good treatment later. The husband's motives varied too. He might wish to live with someone else. He might resent maintenance costs. He might accept a relationship already formed. He might use the ritual to punish and expose his wife. A shared form does not prove a shared purpose. The woman's motives were equally varied. Affection for the buyer, fear of the husband, hope for economic stability, desire to leave violence, pressure from both men, simple exhaustion with a failed household. The newspaper price tells us almost nothing about these motives. This is why the custom should not be reduced to one modern slogan. It was not simply slavery. It was not simply divorce. It was not simply female agency. It was not simply male oppression. It was an unofficial separation ritual built inside a legal system that gave husbands more power and poor couples almost no route to remarriage. Every case expressed that structure differently. The language of property remains unavoidable because English marriage law placed husband and wife in unequal positions. Blackstone's famous summary described husband and wife as one person in law, with the wife's legal existence suspended or incorporated during marriage. The phrase sounds abstract. In daily life, it affected wages, debts, contracts, property, and the ability to make decisions without a husband's participation. Coverture was never as simple as saying a wife owned nothing and could do nothing. Married women traded. They managed shops. They acted through trusts and separate estates. Local custom sometimes recognized independent activity. Women negotiated around the law constantly. Yet, the ordinary legal presumption favored the husband. Exceptions required resources, knowledge, or cooperation. A wealthy family could protect a daughter's property through a marriage settlement. Trustees held funds for her use. Lawyers wrote terms before the wedding. A laborer's daughter brought little property and no legal team. The families most likely to need an inexpensive exit were least able to create protection at the entrance. This inequality shaped the wife sale even when the wife wanted it. She could not usually bargain with her husband as an economically independent legal equal. The buyer supplied the payment. The men exchanged money. Her preference made the arrangement desirable, but her legal weakness determined its form. Some modern economic interpretations describe wife sales as indirect divorce bargains. The unhappy wife preferred life with the new man. The husband valued release or payment. The buyer valued the new household. The transaction made all three better off than continued conflict. This model explains many consensual cases. It does not explain every human detail. A bargain can improve someone's situation without being fair. A woman threatened by violence may rationally choose the only escape offered. A buyer may pay because the husband has power to obstruct her. The result can be better than the marriage and still reveal coercion. Economic improvement and moral justice are not the same measure. The public crowd complicated consent further. A woman who changed her mind faced dozens of spectators. She might fear ridicule. The husband had already announced the sale. The buyer had arrived with money. Backing away could provoke anger from both men. A public ritual can confirm choice and trap it at the same time. Alcohol made this uncertainty greater. Markets and fairs were places of drinking. Some sales ended in taverns. Newspaper reports mention husbands or crowds in a state of intoxication. Thomas Hardy made drunkenness central to Henchard's fictional sale because it offered a plausible explanation for reckless cruelty. Real participants may also have made decisions while impaired. A wife's apparent cheerfulness in a newspaper report does not prove free consent. Reporters described what spectators thought they saw. A woman laughing might feel relief. She might be performing confidence. She might be drunk. She might know that visible distress would encourage the crowd. The record captures behavior, not interior freedom. At the same time, assuming every woman was helpless erases evidence when women spoke clearly. Some chose buyers. Some demanded completion. Some returned to previous husbands. Some left buyers. Some negotiated prices or conditions. Women were not passive simply because the ritual represented them as property. They acted within the ceremony and against it. The halter reveals this contradiction better than any other object. Placed around the neck, it evokes animal control and the threat of restraint. Placed around the waist or arm, it may appear less brutal, but still marks possession. Passed to the buyer, it dramatizes transfer. Held by the wife herself, as some reports suggest, it can become a tool she uses to complete departure. No symbol has one permanent meaning. A wedding ring can represent affection or confinement. A contract can protect or exploit. The wife sale halter could shame, authenticate, frighten, or liberate according to the circumstances. Its public power came from carrying all these meanings at once. The crowd interpreted the symbol through familiar market practice. Animals arrived under control. Goods passed after payment. Witnesses saw the seller release his claim. The wife sale borrowed this grammar because people understood it immediately. The very clarity that made the ritual effective made it degrading. The husband did not need to explain complex church jurisdiction or parliamentary divorce. He held the rope, received the coin, and handed it over. Everyone understood the sentence without words. She is no longer mine to maintain or control. She goes with him. The law rejected the sentence because a husband did not own the marriage as a saleable object. He could not transfer the sacramental and legal bond through private action. Yet other parts of law had taught him to think in terms of claims, services, damages, and maintenance. The custom exaggerated legal inequality into visible ownership. Newspapers used that visibility to shame the poor. Reports frequently called wife sales disgraceful, disgusting, barbarous, or incredible in a civilized country. The writers placed moral distance between readers and participants. The seller belonged to a lower social world, supposedly untouched by progress. Foreign commentators also seized upon the custom. French caricatures pictured the Englishman taking his wife to Smithfield. Continental writers used wife selling as evidence that British claims to civilization concealed brutality. English writers complained that rare incidents damaged the national reputation abroad. The woman's humiliation became international competition. The embarrassment encouraged denial. Respectable readers could dismiss wife sale as ancient folklore, a rural oddity, or a newspaper invention. Thomas Hardy's readers later doubted that such a scene could have occurred. The custom seemed incompatible with the image Victorian Britain preferred to present. Yet the same respectable society maintained divorce laws that favored wealth and men. Condemning the market sale did not automatically provide a working-class woman with an alternative. The spectacle looked uncivilized. The legal exclusion behind it looked orderly. A private parliamentary divorce took place through documents, council, committees, and formal chambers. A wife sale took place beside animals and ale. One looked dignified because institutions surrounded it. The other exposed the bargain openly. Both could be shaped by male power. Only one embarrassed polite observers. This contrast does not make the sale preferable. Legal divorce could investigate evidence, set terms, and permit remarriage. The wife sale offered no reliable protection. The contrast reveals how appearance influences moral judgment. Formal injustice often looks cleaner than improvised survival. Middle-class criticism also focused upon disorder. A wife sale drew crowds. People drank, men shouted. Sexual conflict entered the street. Victorian respectability increasingly demanded that domestic life remain private. Public auction violated the boundary between household and market. The custom was therefore offensive, not only because a woman appeared as property. It allowed poor people to make their own marriage rules in front of everyone. They claimed a power reserved for parliament and church courts. The ritual mocked official control. This helps explain why authorities became less tolerant over time. The state expanded local policing. Newspapers reached wider audiences. Marriage registration improved. Respectable campaigns focused upon public morality. An event once treated as rough custom increasingly appeared as deliberate law-breaking. Magistrates still faced practical difficulty. What result should they impose? Forcing the wife back to the cellar could place her in danger. Punishing the buyer might leave her unsupported. Declaring the sale invalid changed nothing the participants did not already know. The law could condemn the ritual without repairing the marriage. Some husbands were prosecuted or imprisoned after sale. Charges varied. Authorities used statutes concerning vagrancy, disorder, cruelty, or abandonment where available. The punishment warned the public. It did not grant the wife a divorce. The wife could become evidence rather than beneficiary. She might testify about the sale. The husband paid a fine. The buyer withdrew. She remained legally married to the man punished for selling her. Law restored principle and left the household unresolved. This is one reason communities sometimes preferred tolerance. If the new arrangement was stable and everyone consented, intervention could create more poverty and conflict than it prevented. Local officials often balanced formal law against practical peace. Their decisions varied because there was no single national policy devoted to wife sale. Police presence altered the market itself. A planned auction could be moved into a tavern. The public call became a private agreement. The halter disappeared. A written transfer or simple payment replaced theatre. The custom changed form before it vanished. Later, 19th century reports sometimes describe sales arranged without an open auction. A husband accepted money from the new partner. The wife moved. Witnesses signed a note. The transaction retained the idea of transfer while avoiding the spectacle increasingly condemned. This quieter form is harder to identify in archives. It resembles an ordinary separation payment. Without a bellman or rope, the newspaper may not call it wife selling. The apparent decline of public auctions may partly reflect transformation into less visible bargains. The Matrimonial Causes Act of 1857 changed the legal landscape. It transferred full divorce from private parliamentary legislation to a new civil court. For the first time, people did not need a separate act of parliament for every dissolution. Divorce remained expensive and unequal. It became more available. A husband could obtain divorce on proof of his wife's adultery. A wife still needed adultery, combined with an additional serious offense. The reform did not establish equality. It reduced the extraordinary cost of the old route. For working-class couples, even the new court could remain distant. Fees, lawyers, travel, evidence, and social exposure discouraged petitions. The wife sale did not disappear in 1857. Legal reform weakens custom gradually when practical access lags behind statute. The new court also increased public knowledge that wife selling had no legal effect. Newspapers reported divorce cases. Marriage law became a visible subject of reform. The market auction looked less like the only possible route and more like an unlawful relic. Later reforms changed married women's property rights. The Married Women's Property Acts of 1870 and 1882 allowed wives increasing control over earnings and property. These changes did not directly create easy divorce. They altered the economic dependence that made marital exit difficult. A woman controlling wages could support herself after separation. She could bargain without routing payment through a new man. Property law did not create emotional freedom, but it expanded practical options. The wife-sale triangle became less necessary. Urbanization also changed community witnessing. In a small market town, everyone might know the husband, wife, and buyer. The public ritual established local consensus. In a large city, the crowd consisted of strangers. Their memory offered little protection. The community archive weakened. Formal documents became more important as people moved. Employers, landlords, registrars, and courts asked for names and certificates. A village reputation could not travel with a couple to Manchester or London. Custom lost power in an increasingly bureaucratic society. Transportation made escape easier and verification easier at the same time. Railways allowed a couple to leave quickly. Postal networks, newspapers, police communication, and registration allowed the past to follow. The informal new household faced a growing paper trail. Changing attitudes toward domestic violence and women's rights also influenced perception. Campaigners exposed cruelty hidden within marriage. Legal separation and protection orders expanded in limited ways. The idea that a husband possessed natural authority to transfer a wife became harder to defend publicly. The decline was not a straight line from ignorance to enlightenment. Women remained economically vulnerable. Divorce law remained discriminatory. Public shame still fell heavily upon wives. Some later sales occurred after reform. Custom outlived the conditions that created it, because habits and local beliefs survive statutes. The 19th century press treated late cases as astonishing survivals. Headlines emphasized that such an event had occurred in the present year. The date itself became part of the scandal. How could wife-selling happen in an age of railways, industry, empire, and science? This question allowed readers to imagine progress as distance from the seller. The market man represented a primitive past. The modern reader represented civilization. The comfortable contrast hid continuing inequalities inside lawful marriage. Thomas Hardy disrupted that comfort. The mayor of Casterbridge does not leave the wife sale safely in a comic newspaper paragraph. It follows consequences for years. Henchard's later wealth and respectability do not erase the act. The poor laborer becomes a mayor, but the market remains inside him. Susan's position in the novel also exposes legal uncertainty. She lives with Newson as his wife because she believes the sale has ended her marriage. When she thinks Newson is dead, she returns to Henchard. The plot depends upon ordinary people treating an invalid custom as binding. Hardy asks, who possesses moral authority when law, custom, and affection disagree? Henchard is the legal husband. Newson behaves as family. Susan attempts to protect her daughter. No auction price can resolve these claims. The novel's tragedy helped make wife-selling famous beyond the historical record. For many readers, Henchard's sale is the custom. This creates another distortion. His act is impulsive, drunken, and cruel. Many real sales were planned among 3 consenting adults. Fiction selected the version best suited to tragedy. It also captured the custom's deepest weakness. Even an agreed sale could not make the past disappear. The legal marriage waited. The first husband's rights waited. A child's identity waited. The ceremony promised more finality than it could deliver. Modern retellings often begin with shock. Englishmen sold their wives like cattle. The sentence gains attention because it is partly true and badly incomplete. Men did lead wives with halters and accept payment. They did not possess a lawful market right to sell women. The events often functioned as separations, sometimes arranged by the wives themselves. Correcting the sentence should not drain it of force. A society forced poor couples to imitate a cattle auction because legal divorce was unavailable. That is not less disturbing. It is more precise. The custom reveals how people improvise when official institutions ignore them. Improvisation can be creative. It can also reproduce the injustice of the system being escaped. Wife selling solved the problem through the husband's authority because husbandly authority was the material available. A different society might have created mutual divorce before witnesses. English communities created a transfer from one man to another. The choice of ritual tells us how marriage was imagined. The wife's consent could matter greatly. The husband's release mattered publicly. No equivalent husband-selling custom developed on the same scale. A few reports describe wives selling husbands, but these were exceptional and lacked the same established ritual. The imbalance reflects legal power. A wife did not possess the recognized authority to release a husband's obligations through sale. A husband could leave more easily. His wages belonged to him. His legal identity remained complete. If he deserted, the wife bore much of the practical damage. The custom formed around the person whose consent, law, and community treated as decisive. This does not mean husbands always benefited. A man trapped in a hostile marriage without wealth also lacked affordable divorce. He could not lawfully remarry. A sale offered release from maintenance and conflict. Patriarchy gave him power over the wife, while denying both spouses an easy legal exit. Systems can privilege and trap the same person in different ways. The husband controlled the transaction. He also needed a buyer and public performance because the law would not end his marriage. His privilege shaped the solution. His poverty made the solution necessary. Class and gender, therefore, intersect throughout the story. A rich man used courts and parliament. A poor man used the market. A rich woman had family settlements and influence, but faced a harsher divorce standard. A poor woman depended upon custom, desertion, or a new partner. No one experienced marriage law through gender alone or class alone. The wife sale placed all of these inequalities in one picture. A rope represented gender. A market represented class. A tiny price represented symbolism. A crowd represented custom. A magistrate arriving later represented law. The buyer completed the picture. He represented the future the couple wanted to create. Sometimes that future was affectionate. Sometimes it failed quickly. The ritual could open a door. It could not determine what waited beyond it. Imagine that the sale appears to succeed. The woman leaves the market with the buyer. They rent a cottage in a neighboring parish. She uses his surname. Neighbors call them husband and wife. A child is born. Years pass without the first husband returning. From inside the household, the custom has worked. The couple share wages and food. They care for illness. They quarrel and reconcile. The buyer becomes father in daily life to children from the earlier marriage. No official asks for a certificate. The community knows the story and accepts it. Social marriage can be powerful, even when legal marriage is absent. Then the buyer dies. His relatives arrive. Property is small, but valuable to people with little. Tools, furniture, savings, a tenancy, perhaps wages still owed. The woman says she is his widow. The law asks whether she was ever his wife. The market witnesses can prove the sale. Their evidence proves the wrong thing. It shows that her first husband was alive when she formed the second union. The ceremony that established her socially may defeat her legally. The buyer's relatives inherit while she loses the home. Or the first husband becomes poor. He applies for relief. Parish officials search for family who might support him. They discover the wife he sold years earlier. Marriage still connects them on paper. The past returns through poverty. Or the woman leaves the buyer after violence. She seeks maintenance. He answers that no lawful marriage existed. The ritual that protected his relationship from the first husband does not bind him like a husband. She has exchanged one uncertain authority for another. These possibilities explain why wife sale cannot be understood only at the moment of auction. A cheerful departure does not reveal long-term security. The real test comes when death, illness, property, children, or conflict requires law. Custom governs ordinary days. Law often arrives on the worst one. Children occupied the most uncertain position. A child born during the first marriage was legally presumed to belong to the husband under ordinary rules, even if the couple had separated. A wife sale did not automatically change paternity. A child born in the new household could carry the buyer's name socially, while the law connected the mother to another man. Most poor families did not litigate these questions. They lived with practical identity. The man raising the child was father. The household name became the child's name. Church registers, however, might record legitimacy in ways that exposed the situation. Clergy varied in how they handled irregular unions. Baptism forced private arrangements into a public book. The parents gave names. The minister knew local history or heard gossip. A child might be described with the mother's legal surname. A note might mark illegitimacy. The record could follow the child into adulthood. The child had no control over the ritual that created the household. Yet status could affect settlement, inheritance, apprenticeship, reputation, and marriage. Adults used wife sale to escape one legal problem and produced questions for the next generation. Some sales included children explicitly. The buyer accepted the wife and child together. This resembled Hardy's fictional scene, though real arrangements varied. A buyer willing to support a child demonstrated commitment. He also acquired the labor and responsibility of another dependent person. Other children stayed with the husband. A mother leaving the market might lose daily contact with them. The newspaper says she was sold. It does not record the goodbye. The cost of escape may have included motherhood. This silence changes the emotional meaning of consent. A woman could choose the buyer and still grieve children left behind. The market solved the adult partnership by dividing a family. No coin measured that loss. Custody law strongly favored fathers during much of the period. A husband possessed extensive rights over legitimate children. A wife leaving him could not assume she would take them. The new relationship might offer personal safety at the price of legal motherhood. The Custody of Infants Act of 1839 later allowed separated mothers limited rights to petition for custody of young children. The reform was narrow but important. Before it, the husband's control over children reinforced his control over marital exit. A wife sale did not override that control. It depended upon what he agreed to release. The husband could use children as leverage. He might permit the wife to go if she left them. He might demand the buyer support them. He might divide siblings. Consent obtained under these conditions was real and constrained. The buyer could also bargain. A man willing to take the woman might refuse several children. His affection had an economic limit. The wife faced a choice the market crowd never saw clearly. The final price could conceal negotiations about lives not standing beside the rope. This hidden bargaining resembles the unseen work behind many public ceremonies. The wedding lasts an hour. The marriage settlement takes months. The wife sale lasts minutes. The separation may have been negotiated through nights of argument. The spectacle is only the signature. Prices varied widely. Some sales ended at 1 penny or 1 shilling. Others involved guineas, animals, food, or drink. A high price did not necessarily mean greater degradation. A low price did not necessarily mean affectionate symbolism. The meaning depended upon the bargain. A token price could signal that the husband wanted release rather than profit. It could also insult the wife. A substantial price could compensate the husband for loss of services. It could also prove the buyer's commitment. Newspaper readers treated price as comedy because context was missing. The Newfoundland dog in the Carlisle sale became famous because it made the exchange sound absurd. For Joseph Thompson, the dog had practical value. For Mary, it may have meant nothing. For the newspaper, it transformed separation into a story readers repeated. The object survived in memory longer than the woman's later life. Prices also copied auction ritual. A bidder had to offer something. Without payment, the event looked like desertion. With payment, the husband could claim a completed sale. The amount mattered less than the public acceptance. Witnesses sometimes received drink after the transaction. This was not merely celebration. Shared drinking created participation. A man who accepted the seller's ale became part of the memory. Community consent spread through the public house. The drink also made later testimony unreliable. Years afterwards, who remembered the exact words? Was the woman asked directly? Did the husband promise maintenance? Were children included? The most important terms may never have been written. The custom depended upon memory and then damaged it with alcohol. When disputes reached magistrates, stories competed. The husband claimed the buyer accepted all responsibility. The buyer claimed he paid only for companionship. The wife claimed both men had promised support. Witnesses remembered laughter. The law found no valid divorce beneath the performance. Magistrates could respond with moral anger. A husband appearing before them after selling his wife had publicly rejected the responsibilities respectable marriage demanded. Even if the wife had chosen the buyer, the husband's behavior challenged social hierarchy. Punishment defended the institution. Yet a magistrate might privately recognize the impossibility of forcing the couple together. Ordering cohabitation did not create affection. The state could require maintenance. It could not rebuild the household. This gap between legal bond and lived relationship sits at the center of divorce history. For centuries, marriage law treated breakdown as offense rather than condition. Someone had to be guilty. Adultery, cruelty, desertion, or invalidity provided legal categories. Two poor people who simply could not live together had no easy, recognized answer. Wife sale created an answer without asking who could prove fault. In this sense, the ritual anticipated later ideas of mutual divorce. The husband, wife, and buyer agreed that the first union had ended. The public witnessed consent. No court investigated sin. The community accepted a new domestic arrangement. But the ritual did not recognize the spouses as equal individuals. The husband sold. The wife was sold. The buyer bought. Its procedure carried the hierarchy of the old marriage into the new separation. An egalitarian result cannot be assumed from a consensual outcome. The sale could also allow a husband to avoid responsibility for abuse. A violent man might accept payment and let the wife escape. This benefited her immediately. It allowed him to leave without legal judgment or penalty. The community solved danger privately and preserved the abuser's freedom. Alternatively, a husband might force the sale because he wanted a new partner. The wife could be pressured to accept an available buyer. The public ceremony then converted abandonment into supposed consent. Without her testimony, historians cannot know how often this occurred. Reports of outright force exist, but they do not always contain enough detail to separate violence from sensational journalism. A husband dragging a resisting wife makes a powerful story. A newspaper hostile to the custom may emphasize resistance. A seller defending himself may claim agreement. The truth must be reconstructed cautiously. Physical violence was part of marriage regardless of wife sale. The law permitted husbands no unlimited right to beat wives, but social and legal responses to domestic cruelty were inadequate. Women sought help from relatives, neighbors, magistrates, church courts, and charitable institutions. Access varied. A market sale could become one desperate route out. Neighborhood intervention often mattered more than formal law. People heard violence through walls. Relatives offered beds. Women shared information. Employers helped someone leave. A wife sale succeeded or failed within these networks. The buyer alone did not create escape. A community willing to recognize the new household did. This recognition could protect a woman from the first husband. If he attempted to reclaim her, neighbors reminded him of the sale. They had heard him announce release. He risked ridicule for reversing himself. Custom used shame as enforcement. The husband's masculine honor became tied to keeping the bargain. He had accepted payment publicly. Returning for the wife made him appear dishonest. The same patriarchal values that enabled the sale could prevent interference afterward. The buyer faced similar pressure. He had taken the halter and presented himself as provider. Abandoning the woman exposed him as a man unable to maintain what he claimed. Public masculinity supported the new household where law did not. The wife's honor was harder to protect. Critics could call her adulterous regardless of the sale. If the new union failed, blame might fall upon her character. The men could describe the transaction as a bad bargain. She remained the person evaluated. Women responded by managing reputation. A wife might insist upon a respectable public sale rather than secret elopement. The ceremony demonstrated that the husband consented. She had not simply run away. This distinction could matter among neighbors who condemned adultery but accepted customary separation. The rope therefore did something a love letter could not. It placed responsibility upon the husband. He stood before witnesses and surrendered his objection. The woman's later cohabitation appeared authorized by the man entitled to complain. This was especially valuable because criminal conversation law treated the wife's lover as having injured the husband. Payment neutralized the claim informally. The buyer compensated the person the law recognized. The wife's own injury from an unhappy marriage remained outside the transaction. The custom mirrors the legal action almost perfectly. In court, a lover paid the husband damages after adultery. At market, the lover paid before or during separation. The wife moved from the relationship described as injury into the relationship she preferred. The informal bargain reversed the lawsuit's timing. The amount in criminal conversation cases involving elites could be enormous. Jurors measured the husband's honor, status, conduct, and loss. Poor men could not access such litigation, but they understood compensation. The market reduced aristocratic damages to a shilling and a drink. The husband might also waive a future claim expressly. By accepting the price, he signaled that the buyer no longer owed damages. This practical protection helps explain why the buyer participated in a ritual everyone knew lacked divorce power. He was purchasing the husband's non-interference. The woman was purchasing it indirectly through the buyer. Because coverture limited her property and legal agency, she could not always pay the husband herself with independent funds. The new man's money became the mechanism of release. This interpretation fits cases where the wife already lived with the buyer or selected him. It fits less well where bidding appeared genuinely open. A woman sold to an unknown man faced a more literal market. Evidence suggests the prearranged buyer was common, not universal. Open bidding increased danger. Spectators could make jokes. A stranger could offer money. The husband might prefer a higher price over the wife's choice. The woman's ability to refuse determined whether the ritual remained negotiated separation or became coercive transfer. The record rarely describes the rule clearly. Some reports say the wife was allowed a veto. Others imply the husband controlled acceptance. Community custom may have expected her agreement without stating it formally. Repeated practice can contain unwritten protections and unwritten abuses. A buyer unknown at the start might still become acceptable during negotiation. The wife could speak with him. Friends could advise. The market lasted long enough for a decision. This is possible. It should not be assumed. The uncertainty is one reason historians disagree about emphasis. One approach sees wife selling primarily as patriarchal degradation. Another sees it as a working-class divorce mechanism that often served women's interests. The best evidence refuses to choose one description for every case. The practice was structurally patriarchal. The husband performed authority. It was sometimes instrumentally useful to wives. Both statements can be true without canceling each other. The difference between structure and use is essential. A locked gate is oppressive. A person may use a loose hinge in that gate to escape. The escape does not prove the gate was designed for freedom. Wife selling was a loose hinge in marriage law. The custom's rarity also reflects the conditions required. A wife needed a willing buyer or destination. The husband needed to agree or be pressured. The community needed to tolerate the ritual. The parties needed confidence that officials would not intervene. Many unhappy marriages lacked one of these elements. A woman without a new partner could not use the typical sale. A husband, hoping to profit, might demand too much. A community hostile to the custom could shame everyone. A violent husband could refuse. The mechanism was available only to certain people at certain moments. This makes the term folk divorce useful but incomplete. The ritual imitated divorce socially. It did not provide universal access, legal security, or equal procedure. It was not a community court open to any unhappy spouse. It was a bargain shaped by opportunity. The word sale also varies in historical records. Some transactions called sales may have been separation agreements with token payment. Some separations may have been described as sales by hostile reporters even without an auction. Classification depends upon language chosen by observers. A newspaper could turn cohabitation into wife sale because the phrase attracted readers. A husband could call a sale a friendly transfer to avoid accusations of abandonment. A magistrate could call it prostitution to condemn everyone involved. Names carried moral judgment. The participants may have used simpler language. He has let me go. She has gone with him. We settled it. The market phrase entered print because it sounded extraordinary. The lived arrangement may have felt ordinary within the neighborhood. This difference between printed scandal and local normality explains the tone of many reports. The journalist is shocked. The village already knows. The crowd attends not because no one has heard of the custom, but because this particular marriage is ending. Spectators may include relatives and friends. Their presence gives the event a strange resemblance to a wedding. A couple stands publicly. Words are spoken. Money changes hands. Witnesses gather. Drink follows. The woman leaves with a new partner. The resemblance is not accidental. The sale unmade one marriage and socially began another. It reversed the wedding ceremony. Instead of a father giving a bride to a husband gave a wife to another man. Patriarchal transfer appeared at both ends. Marriage ceremonies themselves included the language of giving. Women changed households and often surnames. Property and dowry moved. The wife sale exaggerated familiar patterns until they became grotesque. Its shock came partly from making ordinary marital transfer visible after marriage rather than before it. At a respectable wedding, consent, religion, family, and celebration dignified the movement. At a wife sale, a halter and auction stripped away dignity. The two rituals were not equivalent. They shared a social assumption that a woman's household position could be negotiated among men. Women exercised choice within weddings too, though family pressure could be immense. The history of wife sale belongs to the wider history of consent in marriage. Consent was spoken at the altar. Its withdrawal later had no easy legal form. The market supplied a rough language for withdrawal. The wife's presence was therefore crucial. A husband could announce a sale without her, but the buyer needed the person to form a household. The ceremony's effectiveness depended upon her movement. Her body completed the claim that consent had changed. This may explain why newspapers carefully noted whether she appeared willing. A cheerful woman made the event look like collusion. A resisting woman made it look like cruelty. Observers understood that her attitude changed moral meaning, even if law ignored the sale entirely. Public opinion was not uniformly hostile. Some crowds treated the event as legitimate custom. Others mocked or attacked the husband. Women in the crowd might sympathize with the wife. Men might resent the seller's behavior. A market did not possess one collective mind. Crowd action could shape the result. Bidders could refuse. Spectators could insist the wife choose. Friends could stop violence. Constables could intervene. The ritual opened a private conflict to unpredictable public power. For a wife facing abuse, publicity might be safer than private negotiation. The husband could not strike her freely before hundreds of witnesses. The buyer's promise became public. The crowd offered temporary protection. For another wife, the crowd magnified humiliation. Every neighbor saw the rope. Children heard jokes. The story followed her into the new household. Publicity protected the agreement and permanently marked the woman. This double effect is repeated throughout the custom. Witnesses protect and expose. Payment releases and objectifies. The halter authenticates and degrades. The buyer offers escape and new dependence. The husband loses responsibility and confirms authority. No interpretation that removes these contradictions can explain why wife selling lasted. It survived because the ritual was crude enough to be understood, flexible enough to be adapted, and useful enough for some people to tolerate. It declined because the same qualities became increasingly unacceptable and less necessary. The decline can be seen in the changing language of reports. Early accounts sometimes describe the sale as a strange local event without demanding major punishment. Later reports emphasize disgrace. The journalist reminds readers that the transaction occurred in the 19th century, as though the date itself should have prevented it. Modernity became an argument against custom. The spread of professional policing mattered. Before organized local forces, markets were regulated by a mixture of constables, magistrates, property owners, and crowd expectations. Intervention could be slow. As police became more visible, a bellman announcing an unlawful wife sale attracted official attention quickly. Registration changed the environment too. Civil registration of births, marriages, and deaths began in England and Wales in 1837. A couple forming a new household faced a growing documentary state. Names, marriages, and children appeared in records that could be compared. Local memory no longer stood alone. The census added another layer. Households identified relationships and occupations. A woman might be listed as wife to the buyer, while another record preserved her first marriage. The state did not investigate every inconsistency. It accumulated evidence that made informal identity less secure. Printed newspapers expanded beyond local audiences. A sale intended to convince one village could become national scandal. Officials felt pressure to act when inaction appeared in print. The same publicity that once protected the new couple now threatened prosecution. Railways carried the report faster than the participants could escape it. A man selling his wife in a provincial market became an example discussed in London, Scotland, Ireland, or France. The custom lost control of its audience. Respectability also changed among working people. The idea that wife sale belonged naturally to the poor came partly from observers looking downward. Working-class communities were not united in support. Religious movements, friendly societies, unions, temperance organizations, and self-improvement culture promoted disciplined domestic life. Many laborers found the ritual as shameful as middle-class critics did. Temperance campaigns had a particular reason to condemn it. Reports often connected fairs, public houses, and drunken husbands with wife sales. Alcohol appeared as the substance turning marital misery into spectacle. Henchard's drunken act later fit this moral framework perfectly. Reducing alcohol did not solve divorce law. It changed the explanation offered for public cruelty. The drunken seller became a warning about drink rather than evidence of inaccessible legal institutions. One social reform could hide the need for another. Evangelical religion also strengthened ideals of domestic responsibility. The husband should govern kindly, provide, and remain faithful. The wife should be moral, obedient, and devoted. Wife sale violated the ideal from every direction. It displayed failed male authority, female departure, public sexuality, and commercialized marriage. The ideal could support women by condemning abandonment. It could also trap them by treating preservation of marriage as more important than safety. Domestic ideology produced protection and confinement together. Campaigners for women's rights attacked the laws behind marital dependence. Property reform allowed wives to own earnings and assets. Custody reform recognized limited maternal claims. Divorce reform challenged unequal standards. Each change reduced the practical need for a husband to sell consent. The 1857 Divorce Court was an important beginning, not an instant solution. Proceedings remained public. Adultery remained central. Women faced a higher threshold than men. Poor petitioners still encountered costs. The first civil court widened the door without removing the steps. Later, legal aid and procedural changes would matter enormously, but they belonged to a much longer history. For the couples attending 18th century markets, these reforms lay beyond imagination. They worked with the rules available that week. The decline of wife sale should therefore be understood as institutional substitution. The ritual lost ground when courts, property rights, maintenance orders, policing, and documentation offered other ways to organize separation. Moral condemnation alone had never been enough. People abandon an unofficial solution most reliably when an official one becomes usable. Some late cases occurred after divorce reform because institutions do not reach everyone equally. A rural laborer may know a custom better than a court. A couple may fear publicity. A husband may demand payment. A buyer may prefer an old ritual that places responsibility clearly in local eyes. Law changes faster than habit. Late sales also became acts of imitation. People had heard stories about halters and markets. They repeated the form because it was recognizable. What began as practical custom could survive as folklore performed deliberately. A husband might announce a sale as a joke. The joke could become serious. A crowd gathered. Money changed hands. Newspapers reported the incident. Distinguishing custom, parody, and actual separation becomes harder near the end of the tradition. This uncertainty affects the final dates often given for wife selling. Historians can identify reported examples into the late 19th century and occasional claims later. The last genuine case depends upon what counts. An open market auction? A private payment? A humorous performance? A couple who actually lived apart afterward? Rather than searching for one final sale, it is better to watch the ritual lose its function. The rope becomes a joke. The crowd becomes hostile. The magistrate intervenes. The buyer gains no confidence. The woman gains no social protection. At that point, the custom is dead, even if someone imitates it again. Its afterlife continued in literature, cartoons, local histories, and sensational lists of strange laws. The phrase wife selling survived because it compresses an entire legal failure into 2 words. It sounds unbelievable. It invites a question immediately. The phrase also invites false claims. Some retellings say wife sale was legal. It was not. Others say every buyer was a stranger. Often, he was the woman's chosen partner. Some say the husband sold her for profit. Many prices were symbolic. Others romanticize the custom as a simple form of mutual divorce. Some women were humiliated or coerced. Accuracy requires holding all 4 corrections together. Illegal, often prearranged, usually symbolic, not always consensual. Remove anyone and the story becomes easier but less true. The number of sales requires similar care. Collections include several hundred reports across a long period. Some reports may refer to the same incident. Some are doubtful. Newspapers favored repetition. The custom was established enough to be recognized and rare enough to remain news. This is the correct scale. English husbands did sell wives in public rituals. English society did not send ordinary married women to weekly auctions as a normal property market. The wife sale was an exceptional response to marriage breakdown among people excluded from full divorce. The distinction matters for visual storytelling. A market crowded with women waiting to be purchased would be false. One couple surrounded by curious neighbors is closer to the record. The strangeness came from interruption of ordinary market life. A bell rang. People expected news of goods, work, or a lost animal. Instead, they heard that a marriage was ending. The event was memorable precisely because it was not routine. The woman's clothing would usually be ordinary. She was not displayed as an enslaved captive imported for sale. She arrived from a nearby household known to the crowd. Friends might stand among spectators. The familiar person made the object-like ritual more disturbing. The buyer's presence also changed the atmosphere. If neighbors knew him as her lover, the result was predictable. Bidding became theater. If he was unknown, tension increased. Would she leave with him? Would the husband accept? Would the crowd permit it? The husband's announcement performed loss of authority while pretending to exercise authority. He controlled the sale. At the same time, he admitted that his marriage had failed and another man would take his place. The crowd could mock him as easily as the wife. Cuckoldry carried deep shame in English culture. A husband whose wife preferred another man risked ridicule. The sale allowed him to convert rejection into transaction. He had not simply been abandoned. He had agreed and received payment. This may explain the exaggerated masculine speech in some reports. The seller lists the wife's faults. He presents himself as the person choosing release. Public criticism protects pride. The buyer pays, allowing the husband to claim value rather than defeat. The wife could use the same performance differently. By standing beside the buyer and leaving willingly, she made preference visible. The husband's speech could not hide the fact that she chose another household. The rope marked his authority. Her movement marked its end. The buyer also performed masculinity. He could afford the token price. He accepted support. He stood before the previous husband without fear. Taking the halter announced that he would replace the seller. The ritual was a contest among male roles as much as a transfer of a woman. Yet the wife determined whether either role became real after the market. She could refuse domestic labor. She could leave again. She could return to the first husband. She could outlive both. The sale attempted to fix her position. Life continued changing it. The Hull report, where the buyer paid the husband to take the wife back, destroys any simple idea of permanent ownership. The first transaction failed. A second bargain reversed it. Human preference turned the supposed property into someone no buyer could keep by receipt. This reversal may have amused newspaper readers. It should also remind us that women were not objects, even when men used the language of objects. The custom worked only through continuing relationships. A cow does not renegotiate the household. A wife does. The language of sale therefore concealed the very thing that made the event possible. The woman had will. She could choose, resist, return, or leave. If she possessed no will, the transaction would be ordinary ownership rather than improvised divorce. This is why the ritual sits uneasily between sale and agreement. Its outward form denies female agency. Its practical function often depends upon it. The contradiction is not a problem to solve. It is the historical reality to describe. The same contradiction appears in marriage law itself. Coverture described unity under the husband. Daily households depended upon wives managing money, labor, credit, children, and trade. Law reduced legal identity. While life required practical authority, women navigated the distance. Wife sale emerged from that distance. Official law saw one married unit. The village saw two people who no longer wished to live together. The market created a new unit without permission. The state eventually moved closer to lived reality. Civil divorce recognized that valid marriages could end. Property reform recognized married women as economic individuals. Custody reform recognized maternal claims. These changes were incomplete and unequal, but they reduced the gap where wife sale had operated. The custom then became unnecessary before it became unimaginable. First, people gained alternatives. Later, society forgot why anyone had needed the auction. Once the cause disappeared from memory, only the rope remained. This is how historical practices become jokes. The audience sees the strange ritual and not the institutional failure behind it. The husband appears absurd. The wife appears passive. The crowd appears primitive. The legal system stays outside the frame. Bringing the law back into the frame changes the story. A full divorce required wealth. A separated wife lacked secure property rights. A lover faced legal claims from the husband. The parish feared maintenance costs. The new couple needed witnesses. The auction answered each problem badly but visibly. It was not a good divorce system. It was a system used where no good divorce system existed for the poor. That sentence explains both its usefulness and its cruelty. We can test the explanation by removing the obstacles. Give both spouses affordable legal divorce. Allow remarriage. Recognize the wife's property and earnings. Set custody and maintenance through enforceable orders. Protect her from violence. No rope is needed. No buyer is needed. No husband receives a coin. The disappearance of wife sale followed this logic over time. As the legal system began performing these tasks, the market ceremony lost purpose. The custom was not defeated by people becoming less strange. It was defeated by institutions becoming more capable. That process remains unfinished in broader human history. Where divorce is inaccessible, expensive, dangerous, or socially forbidden, people still invent informal separations. They migrate. They form new households. They use religious or customary procedures not recognized by the state. The English wife sale belongs to a larger pattern. Human relationships end whether law permits them to end or not. Law decides whether the ending produces safety or uncertainty. 18th century English law often produced uncertainty. The market tried to organize it. The practice also warns against assuming official illegality prevents social validity. The wife sale had no legal force. It could still govern a village. The couple's daily life depended upon neighbors, not parliament. Social recognition can be powerful enough to build a family. It may not be powerful enough to protect that family in crisis. This tension exists wherever custom and state law differ. People may consider a couple married, while courts do not. A community may consider a debt settled while documents say otherwise. The arrangement works until someone needs official enforcement. Wife sale made the tension unusually visible. Its public character was both strength and weakness. The crowd supplied legitimacy. The crowd could not supply a lawful divorce decree. The bellman announced the result. He could not change the register. The coin ended the quarrel. It could not end the marriage. The participants may have known all of this and continued anyway. People often accept partial solutions when complete solutions are unavailable. A roof that leaks less is better than no roof. A public separation without legal security can be better than continued violence or hatred. This practical judgment should not be mistaken for ignorance. Poor people understood law through encounters with parish officers, magistrates, employers, landlords, and neighbors. They knew official systems could be expensive and hostile. Choosing custom could be rational. It could also fail disastrously. Rational choice does not guarantee good outcome. The woman leaving the market judged the immediate household. She could not predict death, inheritance, prosecution, or abandonment 20 years later. Neither can most people making life decisions. The historical task is not to declare her foolish. It is to reconstruct the limits around the choice. Who controlled money? Who could seek divorce? Who kept children? Who threatened violence? Who offered a home? Who stood as witness? When these questions are asked, the wife reappears from behind the price. She becomes a person choosing under pressure rather than a commodity measured in shillings. In some cases, she still appears as a victim of force. In others, she appears as the organizer of her own departure. In many, she remains unknown. The unknown cases deserve silence rather than invention. A newspaper says a wife was sold. It does not say whether she smiled freely. We can explain the system without pretending to read her mind. Historical honesty sometimes means leaving the door closed. The named women deserve more than the label sold wife. Mary Thompson was a young woman leaving Joseph for Henry Mears. The woman at Wenlock reportedly insisted upon completion. The Hull wife returned from one household to another. Their decisions survive in fragments. The fragments resist one universal story. The men also become more complex when moved beyond caricature. Joseph Thompson performed hostility while participating in an agreed separation. A reluctant husband could be pressed by the wife. A buyer could be affectionate or exploitative. A magistrate could condemn the sale and still have no humane solution. No role guarantees one character. The system remains the stable element. Divorce was inaccessible. Marriage law favored husbands. Property law restricted wives. Communities improvised. The details changed inside that frame. This is the difference between explaining a practice and excusing it. Explanation identifies the pressures that made the ritual useful. Excuse would deny humiliation or harm. The evidence supports explanation. It does not require excuse. A woman tied with a halter in a market has been publicly degraded even when she agreed because the ritual offered escape. A husband paying thousands for parliamentary divorce has been privileged even when his grievance was genuine. Historical understanding can name both facts without flattening either person. By the end of the 19th century, the market rope had become a symbol of a past Britain wanted to disown. Divorce law remained imperfect. Women's equality remained distant, but the public sale no longer served a widely recognized local function. The crowd had changed its mind. Without community recognition, the ritual was only spectacle. The husband could shout, a buyer could pay, the woman could leave. Neighbors no longer treated the act as divorce. The custom's unwritten court had closed. Return now to the market from the opening. The bell has stopped. The husband has accepted the price. The buyer holds the end of the rope. For a moment, the crowd waits to see whether the woman moves. That movement is the real conclusion of the auction. If she walks with the buyer, the community begins rewriting her life. Yesterday, she belonged to one household. Tonight, she sleeps in another. Tomorrow, neighbors choose which name to call her. The law remains unchanged in a distant room. Daily life changes with every step. The husband counts the coins or takes the drink promised to him. He may feel relieved. He may feel humiliated. He may already regret the bargain. Public performance gives him little space to change his mind. The crowd has heard him release her. The buyer now carries more than a halter. He carries an expectation. Provide a home. Do not return her like unwanted goods. Do not invite the first husband's interference. The witnesses who legitimize his new position also watch his conduct. The woman walks between two kinds of uncertainty. Behind her is a marriage she wants to end or has been forced to leave. Ahead is a relationship the law does not recognize as marriage. The sale creates distance from the first danger without guaranteeing protection from the next. This is why the final line of the introduction matters. The most important item exchanged is not a person, even though the ritual presents her as one. What changes hands is the husband's public claim, his claim to object, his claim to demand damages, his claim to insist that the woman remains inside his household. The law does not recognize this transfer completely. The neighborhood often does. The price purchases a local promise that the old husband will stand aside. For couples excluded from divorce, that promise can be more useful than a legal principle they cannot afford to invoke. It can also be broken. The husband may return. The buyer may leave. A magistrate may intervene. A child may need inheritance. A parish may demand maintenance. Every future crisis tests a bargain made beside a market stall. The sale is therefore neither meaningless nor secure. Calling it meaningless ignores the households it created. Calling it divorce ignores the rights it failed to provide. It is best understood as a public, customary separation with no power to dissolve the legal marriage. Why use an auction? Because public exchange was a language ordinary communities understood. It created witnesses. It compensated the legal husband. It signaled that another man accepted responsibility. It transformed private adultery or desertion into a visible agreement. Why the halter? Because custom borrowed the clearest symbol of transfer available in a market. The rope made the husband's release visible. It also made the wife's unequal position impossible to hide. The same object gave the ritual force and gave later generations reason to recoil. Why did some wives agree? Because the buyer was often already chosen. Because the marriage had failed. Because separation without the husband's consent could bring pursuit, poverty, lost children, or accusations of adultery. Because an imperfect exit can be valuable when the official door is closed. Why were some sales cruel? Because a husband's legal and economic power allowed pressure. Because crowds humiliate. Because consent can be shaped by violence and poverty. Because a ritual that treats a person as transferable always creates room for abuse. Why did the custom decline? Not because one magistrate finally explained that it was illegal. People had heard that before. It declined as affordable civil divorce slowly expanded. Married women gained greater control over property, policing and registration strengthened, and communities stopped treating the market ceremony as a valid end to marriage. The custom lost its audience. Without witnesses willing to believe, the auction could no longer create social divorce. The rope became only a rope. The coin became only a coin. The husband's announcement became evidence against him rather than authority over her. The story also explains why law must be judged by accessibility, not only by wording. England possessed a route to full divorce before 1857. A laborer unable to pay could not use it. A right available only through wealth can exist formally and fail socially. The market filled the gap left by that failure. The couples did not create a humane system. They created one they could reach. Its roughness reflected the legal materials around them: husbandly authority, property language, male compensation, parish maintenance, and public witness. They built escape from the same structure that trapped them. This is why the custom should not be treated as proof that poor people cared less about marriage. The opposite may be true. They staged the sale because separation required recognition. They wanted neighbors to understand that one union had ended before another began. A secret affair was not enough. The community needed a ceremony. The ceremony was crude because no official ceremony existed for them. The bellman replaced the court clerk. The market replaced parliament. The crowd replaced a legal record. The token payment replaced a decree. Every part imitated an institution the participants could not enter. The imitation could not supply equal rights. It could supply a remembered decision. For many ordinary lives, memory was the only record available. The market begins to empty. Traders pack their goods. Animals are led away. The people who watched the sale carry the story home. Some laugh, some condemn the husband, some sympathize with the wife. Some believe they have witnessed a valid divorce. Others know that no court will accept it. The three participants leave in separate directions or enter a public house together. By morning, the story has moved through the town. The new couple no longer need to explain why they live under one roof. Everyone already knows. Years later, the details will fade. The price changes in memory. The rope moves from waist to neck. A joke becomes a speech. The woman's answer disappears. What survives is the sentence that an Englishman sold his wife in the market. That sentence is true enough to shock and incomplete enough to mislead. Behind it stands an inaccessible divorce system, a law that merged a wife's economic identity with her husband's, a community inventing its own public settlement, a woman sometimes choosing escape and sometimes being exposed to another form of control. The complete history does not ask us to choose between outrage and understanding. The ritual deserves outrage because it displayed a woman as transferable property. It deserves understanding because people used it to solve a real problem. The legal system refused to solve for them. Both reactions belong in the same account. The woman reaches the edge of the market. She removes the rope or allows the buyer to remove it. No legal document waits for her. No court has granted freedom. No statute recognizes the new household. There is only a public promise and the uncertain life that follows. For tonight, the first husband does not call her back. The buyer keeps walking beside her. The crowd turns toward other business. And an illegal ritual has done what the law would not do cheaply. It has allowed an unhappy marriage to end in the eyes of everyone who matters nearby. Not forever, not safely, not equally, but publicly enough for another life to begin.